All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is Rodrigo Makelele, your host for the Rad Talk. And today I'll be joined by a wonderful leader, a young leader from Pennsylvania, Lancaster, and we'll be talking about youth community leadership, accessible government, and also neighborhood engagement, but also his own journey as a story of why he's involved in what he's involved in and what we can learn from him. Remember that becoming a good leader is largely about knowing how to be humble. You need to be aware that your leadership does not come from nothing, right? We all learn from someone. There's someone that nourished ourselves from their qualities, and the way that inspired us to be who we are today. And that's why we continue to raise and share these experiences on this Rad Talk platform so that everybody, all of us, can learn about how to become better leaders in our communities. Also, know that it's important to open up to the experience of other people in your community so that you can analyze what made them great leaders. Life is a learning curve, and everyone is a student in this school of leadership. Welcome, Ahmed, and thanks for joining the show today. We wanted to first have people get to know you, who you are, what you do, what you're involved in a couple minutes. Let's see what we can learn from your great personality or person.
Well, thank you, Rodrigo. Thanks for having me here today on the podcast. My name is Ahmed, and I'm a volunteer community organizer based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'm also a certified hospitality executive working in the local hotel industry here. I really enjoy being a community organizer here in Lancaster because I get to connect with residents and get to build bridges with neighbors and everything. And it's very important to me to have neighborhood engagement and visibility of underserved communities here in Lancaster. I came to Lancaster as a refugee in the late 1990s. My family lived in refugee camps for 7 years. And we came to the United States in 1997, right here to Lancaster. So to be able to give back to a city that has done a lot for me and my family, is a lot of my life's work. But also, to show others that they could be leaders, that having accessible government is important and having a seat at the table is important. So in my professional capacity and in my volunteer capacity, I try to find ways to build young leaders and show them that they too can be involved.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing about your experience as a leader, your journey, and being in Lancaster and what you've done. That's amazing, and that's what we're learning from many other people. And I think probably my curious question is, what made you decide to get involved in community leadership there in Lancaster? What is that one thing that inspired you or pushed you to become more involved in your community?
I came back to Lancaster. I went to college briefly at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And when I came back, I was actually working on a political campaign for a local race that was happening here in Lancaster. And we were doing a lot of door-to-door direct canvassing, speaking to our neighbors in their neighborhoods, at their front porches. And, I just learned so much about, storytelling and welcoming and, how we need to go out and seek residents where they are, in their communities. And it really inspired me. And even though we didn't win that race, it inspired me to, get involved in local government, get involved in local nonprofits, become a volunteer community organizer. And, it led me to a lot of the work that I'm doing now. Was that original? I remember, some days canvassing in the rain, walking miles, knocking on people's doors, trying to get them registered to vote, asking them what issues they're concerned with, and collecting that data and trying to, move the needle here in Lancaster towards, something that's bigger than all of us, something that is a Lancaster that works for everybody and is inclusive. So I think really that time spent at the doors, canvassing, really positioned me to where I am today. Whereas, I get to be a leader in the community. I work on several different boards. I'm on the Human Relations Commission, and it allowed me to learn how to get involved, but more importantly, learn what the neighbors are saying, what's going on in their neighborhoods.
Awesome, awesome. I think the interesting thing about becoming involved in community is the space that is given, the opportunity that is laid for you, and most of the time you've got to create those opportunities because they're not always given or provided for you to find yourself being able to engage in community leadership. And I think this is a challenge that many young people face in our communities, and especially those that come from other countries, new Americans, refugees, immigrants. It becomes a challenge because of language, because of the social differences, the culture and everything, and people start feeling like they have to step back instead of getting involved. But I think you've taken that. You've taken it hard on yourself, made that one step forward and say, well, I'm going to do something about change. And what I understand and I agree on is that change is something that we create together. We co-create the change, we co-create the community, we co-create the space that we want to live in, right? If we don't create that space, this space is never going to happen. And the only thing that we're going to have remaining is our eyes, to cry and shed tears. And so I know by becoming involved, there's something that you have to face, which is challenges. So anybody face challenges at different levels. And so what do you do, or what have you done to overcome the challenges as you're becoming a leader in your community? What did you do? I wouldn't go back to like what are the challenges, because I assume you have many, you can share a few, but specifically, what did you do to overcome those challenges?
A lot of times it starts off with listening. Listening to the people involved, listening to shareholders and stakeholders, and trying to come to an overall consensus. I've always been somebody who, understands the balance between doing what's best for the overall community and doing how you personally feel or whatever your personal agenda may be. So that presents a challenge sometimes because you're walking through a thin line. When you're doing things like strategic planning or working with people with different perspectives or backgrounds or opinions, you have to try to be a consensus builder and understand. Sometimes it may not have to be about your personal agenda, but other times you have to have the be wise enough to understand that some decisions you have to stand on, and some decisions you have to, sometimes make others, who might be involved with you, they might want you to think a certain way or act a certain way.
Mhm.
But, finding that balance, of what's the best for the overall community, not having an ego or a hidden agenda is something that I've always tried to be transparent about. And there's always going to be challenges, but how do we use these challenges as opportunities? How do we, learn from these challenges, learn from these situations, and try to be a better, be a better community, be a better person. That's what I try to work towards each and every day. Is understanding sometimes people are going to agree with you, sometimes people are going to be angry at you, and you just have to, take the adversity. And that's what leadership is about. In my professional capacity, there's been many times where, I've had to work with people who we had completely different agendas, or we had different goals, but we were able to find consensus. You know, Being a volunteer community organizer, I work with families from, many different parts of the world. I speak with them. We have such a vibrant refugee and immigrant community here in Lancaster.
Mhm.
But even getting people involved sometimes, some folks, they're as new Americans, they kind of get complacent, and they say, we have careers, we have vehicles, we have jobs, the kids are in good schools. My job is just to make sure they go to college, and that's fine
Mhm.
with me. Well, that's great, but also how could we, get involved, have a seat at the table? Because, these decisions are going to be made without us sometimes. And that's why it was very important for me to get involved. I understand there's challenges. I understand, you're putting yourself out there. But I've always been a believer in it's not about me. It's about the
Mhm.
people. Even in my professional capacity, I try to always make people understand that leadership is not about being at the top of the totem pole. It's understanding that the totem pole is upside down, and the people who are the frontline workers, who are the everyday community members. That's who should be at the top. That's who we should be celebrating. And then folks like myself who decide to get into leadership, or things of that nature. We have to understand that it can't be about us. It can't be about our egos. It can't be about our personal agenda. You
Mhm.
have to separate your agenda with what's best for the overall community.
Yeah, that's well said. Our agendas have to come after our communities, because the biggest thing that I continue to see in many places, that people have their own aspiration, goals, and visions, and how they want things to be. But there are things that are common, that impact everybody. When it comes to challenges, opportunities, is everybody. If you look at things like climate change, is a challenge that impacts everybody. So
Yeah.
no one nation, or no one country, or no one person can come and say I can fix this, or I can deal with this myself. It's everybody,
Hmm.
and so that means we have to come with common goals and common agenda to try to face these common challenges, or community challenges. I'll call them that way. And so that's a great segue to try and understand. So as Ahmed, I know you've made decisions to be involved in your local community. How do you receive? How does the community receive you in that position of trying to help the community? Create an inclusive and better community for everybody. In Lancaster, Pennsylvania. How does the community itself receive that approach from your side?
Yeah, a lot of the work that I do is intentional to try to be an example for them, how they too can be leaders, how they could be involved. So just giving them that visibility, through myself, being able to tell their stories through my story. There's many refugee immigrant families just like my family
Mhm.
who have a shared story and a shared journey. And by participating in government, by putting yourself out there, not only are you telling your story, but you're telling the story of many other families, and even those families who didn't get the opportunity to come here. I
Mhm.
think we have a story worth sharing. We have a journey that can be a lot of wisdom can be learned from it if it is shared. So what I try to do is, in my community organizing, I'm very big on how do we retain, refugee and immigrants, here in our communities. We see many times families come in and either in a quest for affordable housing, or things of that nature, moving away from the area or becoming unengaged in their communities. Hey, how can we be here to stay? How can we make an impact? Show them that we are not just former refugees or immigrants, or we're not just hardworking families, but we have stories. We have goals. We're taxpayers. you know there's ways that we need to bring the government to the community, and that's something that I've always have been intentional about as well. Is there's a lot of services that some of these families could can acquire. There's grants that people aren't aware of. Through my neighborhood engagement, I was able to receive several grants to give direct resources back to immigrant and refugee families. So I think it's important for us, especially as youth, to be the next generation of leaders, and to show those who might be new, or are in an underrepresented community, that no, it's important that we have accessible government. It's important that we're a part of the change going on. And through my own personal experiences, I get to be a living example for them. Hey, this can work. We can run for offices. We can be on boards. We can be in commissions. A lot of us lost the power in our former homelands, and we think that it's over and there's nothing for us. But no, we get to regain that power in our communities, and we get to represent all of us and tell all of our story. As refugee and immigrants, a lot of times we hold a large portion of the population in a city. You
Mhm.
know, some of these communities have multiple families within the communities. You know, populations of over 1,000 in a city. You know, that's a block of constituents as well.
Yeah.
You know, you can make serious change. You can, you know, have a city official from your community. But it starts off with being the change you want to see, and being visible and being an example for other community members. You know, a lot of us are very underrepresented. You know, a lot of us feel that we don't have a seat at the table, or our decisions aren't being heard, or you know, we're not a part of, you know, policy making. Well, let's change that. Let's get at the table then. You know, let's build these bridges that we need to have, and it's going to take time. You know, things like strategic planning could take many years. So,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
again, it takes listening to all different perspectives. So, you know, just being, you know, somebody who could be a living example for, you know, leaders who are younger than me or leaders who are emerging, you know, that, you know, it's important that we get involved.
Yeah, and that said, it just reminds me of something. We are trying to see change, as I said at the beginning, but we have to be part of that change that we want to see. But the
Mhm.
biggest important thing about the youth is that that definition of saying we are the change with the future. We are the next generation of leaders, or the leaders of tomorrow. I tend to say every day we are the leaders of today. We're the leaders of now, because the change that we want to see in our
Absolutely.
community happens now. The things that are affecting our lives happen now. The things that are being decided upon our lives happen now. We need to be in that position of saying, well, I'm the leader of today, and I want to start being involved, as you said, Ahmed, being involved in those changes that we want to see, being involved in saying, no, this is not okay. We need to build a generation, we need to build a
Mhm.
community that welcomes me, everybody, all the people around, because I'm also part of this generation. I'm also part of this community. I'm also part of the change that we want to see. And we have to be intentional about that. We have to say, yes, we
Yeah.
are the youth, of course. But also, if you make a decision about healthcare, it's going to affect me. Make a decision about, investments, it's going to affect me. If you make a decision
Hmm.
about climate change, it's going to affect me. Anything that you make as a decision will affect me directly. So I've got to be involved.
Hmm.
I've got to sit at the same table and discuss about the changes that I want to see. And this is why we need to have these many conversations like this, where we hear from ourselves, we learn from each other, and we talk about these challenges that we face. And with this, I'm trying to understand, how do we, so what needs to be done, right? At the personal level, within the younger folks, community, the youth, with the community in general, what should they do to empower more young people, to allow opportunities, or at least to pave the way for other young people to get involved? What needs to be done from the government perspective? The local governments, the state governments, or the federal government, or the global governments, through different platforms, to allow more accessibility for younger people at the table, so that the decisions are made together, including the younger folks. What do you think we need to do?
You know, I think that it really starts with neighborhood engagement. I think,
Mhm.
you know, something that I've always been intentional about is it's not the community's job to come to the government, but it's the government's job to come to the community. You know, who are we as leaders if we're not going to go out into the communities, see the need for engagement? You know, and a lot of people are already leaders. You know, here in Lancaster, we have the Mayor's Neighborhood Leaders Academy, where we find people who are already leaders in their community, and we go out and we try to help them. Hey, how can we help you with your initiative going on? Hey, here's this grant money. You know, keep doing the great work that you're doing. You know, but if we're not out there and making people aware of the opportunities and some of the needs and listening to them, you know, again, it all starts with listening. And you know, some communities have different needs, some have different goals, but you know, let's find the leaders who are already on the ground doing the work, empower them, empower neighborhoods to make the decisions, empower blocks to make decisions about their block. You know, and we need to make spaces for this. So, you know, I encourage cities or, you know, townships to form, you know, leadership academies for their residents. Hey, you could come over here. We'll meet weekly. We'll talk about ideas, network with other young leaders, and then continuously, just like somebody organized us and somebody showed us the opportunities here in government, we need to go ahead and give that same energy to, you know, the youth coming up, you know, and show them, you know, that it's important to sometimes stay in the community or come back to the community that you grew up in.
Yeah.
Often we see people go to college, they leave their communities, and then we wonder why the community is no longer as strong as it used to be. We're
Mhm.
not being intentional about, staying in a geographical location, or, connected after we may move into different areas, and even, form power on a state level. There's going to be decisions that are happening that impact us. So how could we, get that excitement? And the onus is on us. It's our duty, as leaders, or it's our duty, as local government officials, to go out and seek neighborhood engagement and really try to get people engaged in their community. Because if not, there's going to be others who are at the decision, and sometimes they have different agendas than we do, and sometimes their agenda could hurt what we want.
Yeah.
So it starts with getting people involved, doing voter engagement, making sure people are voting, and starts with the census as well. Are we being calculated properly, in our communities,
Mhm.
and getting people involved, is
Yeah.
something that I try to do by an example, but also through education. Education is important, to go out and educate them on what's going on. Are they aware of the things that are affecting their local government? And show them avenues on where they could go to their city council meeting and speak out, or this is the person that you could contact for this resource. And then in that process, you see democracy working right in front of you, and then
Yeah.
they will feel more inclined, and they will feel that government is safe and that government is accessible.
Yeah, sure. And that's not only one thing that we need to appreciate, but also the governments have to understand that this is a large, it's a large issue. It's a bigger issue than they could think about when some people are not have don't have a seat at the table. You can see in almost everywhere in the world, you will see most of the government folks are older people. There's not enough space, not enough share for younger people at the table, but also there's not much opportunity or programs designed for the younger folks for leadership development, for things like that, to empower them to be there where they need to be, where they need to also make decisions or discuss about the decisions that are being made. And it's something that has been concerning me most of my time. How how
Hmm.
do we involve ourselves and make the government understand that they need to involve the younger folks at the table when it comes to any decision making? That's the thing that I keep reflecting myself every day and say, well, we need to do something about it. We need to speak up more as young people about these problems. And also I'm gonna make this and not at least for those watching either on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, or later on TikTok. You can drop your comments. If we've heard a comment from David saying, "Great discussion, guys." We have someone, Merit Sahani from the Democratic Republic of Congo, watching the DRC, which is my country of origin. Thanks for watching, guys. And if you're watching, just let us know if you have any question for Ahmed or for myself. Just feel free to drop it all, and we'll be able to answer as much as we can, or as fluent as we can, if I would say. But again, the other thing is, as you see yourself, Ahmed, uh, what is that advice that you can give to other young people that want to come up as leaders in their communities, try to get involved in their community? What is that advice that you can provide or give to those young folks that think that they look up to you and say, this guy is doing great, this guy is getting involved in our community? We want to do the same. We want to be able to impact our schools, want to be able to impact our streets. We want to be able to impact, positively impact any area of our community. How do we get there? What advice can you give them?
Well, I would always give the advice of take that first step, get involved locally, find out, organizations that are already doing the work in your area, and, get plugged in. That's how I really got started, was through grassroots organizations that were working here in my community. And, I
Mhm.
reached out to them. How can I get involved? I would encourage them to go canvassing, talk to neighbors, get involved in local political elections,
Yeah.
because through that way you get to meet other like-minded folks, and you realize that there's other young people here in your area who are also engaged. engaged, who are also active. And together you could form a network and be that next generation of leaders. And then once you have the numbers, you have the power in numbers, you could go to shareholders, you could go to local governments and say, hey, this is what we would like done. And also run for office yourself. That's something that I'm currently doing. I'm seeking the appointment for a vacancy on city council. And I think it's important that we do things like that, so that we can show other young people that, hey, it's cool to be involved. And that, we have all of these ideas, and, we're the next generation of voters. There's certain things that are going to be coming up here that are going to greatly impact us, and as we see the cost of living going up and rental prices going up across the country, this is our future that we're talking about. A lot of times they're right when they say, your parents, the living of your parents isn't the living of today. That's very true. And I saw my parents struggle growing up when, prices were nowhere near where they're at today. So I think it's important that if we really want to seize our future, we have to be at that table. We have to realize that, a lot of times these decisions are being made by folks, who may not have our best interest in mind. And then also just always remember your community and where you came from. And, I think it's very important that we do that. As a former refugee, I find it very important to still talk to refugee families, talk to immigrants, new Lancastrians, new Americans, and, show them through my own personal engagement and through my own personal story that it's important to have a seat at the table and that you could be a leader. And, if not us, then who? We can't give up. We can't just complain about situations, or it's important that we have a seat at the table, and we may not be able to make the change. Sometimes we may lose the fight, but it's about the long-term goals. It's about moving the needle, and we're not going to win every battle, but how could we have strategic planning for our future, for our next generation, which is going to look a lot different than the communities that our parents grew up in. Especially here in Lancaster, we're having a tough time with affordable housing. And if we as young people want to continue to live, in places like this, we need to get a seat at the table and make people aware of, how we feel about these opinions and what we plan to do to change it. And I really think it starts with getting involved locally. Getting plugged in with people who are already doing the work, working with other leaders, and putting yourself out there. Take that first step, and it can be a time commitment, but the work that you're doing is important, and connecting with others, it's something that's bigger than yourself, and it's humbling, and it makes you realize in life that it's not about your own personal ego. It's about being, a visible impact for others.
All right. Yeah, man, that's awesome. And I think we're almost at the end of our conversation. We keep reminding you to please subscribe to our channels on LinkedIn or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and the name is Roderick Makelele, as you can see on the screen. But also, before we close out, man, what is one thing that you want to say to everybody watching now? What is one thing, only one thing that you want to say to them? Tell them something that if they were to leave with something today, what is that one thing that they should retain from this conversation?
I would certainly say get involved. And also, the people who are getting involved, they need your support. So if you don't want to get involved yourself, if you don't want to run for office yourself, if you don't want to run for that nonprofit board or be a volunteer, support the people who are doing the work. Sometimes, just showing up for them could be important as well. Because a lot of times these community organizers, they have so much on their plate, and it's can be a discouraging job sometimes. But get involved and support those who are getting involved. And even though you may not see the fruits of your labor today, I guarantee you're building a future that's better.
All right. Thank you, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And I hope folks watching today enjoy this conversation and they can come back to us with questions, and we'll be happy to come back again in this space and share more or respond to some of the questions. So thank you, everybody that watched us today. was a great conversation with my friend Ahmed from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. A great guy, community builder, community organizer, an executive in different spaces, including hospitality. And an amazing guy that I've gotten the chance to know from last year. We met actually in Vegas at the National Immigration Integration Conference, and we got to become friends since then. And we've been watching each other doing a great job. And I think I'm proud of you guys, and Ahmed, for your work, but also I'm proud of every young person out there that is trying to do an amazing job to impact their community positively. And this was our conversation on Rad Talk. I'm your host, Rodrigo Makelele, and here we create this space as a safe space for conversations and talks on building sustainable, positive change in our communities. Wherever we are, we try to come together to discuss about what we need to see changing and improving in our communities. That's why this space is designed for us, for me, for you, for everybody that wants to be part of this big change. And so, again, thank you so much. And I can't wait to see you again soon with another guest that will be sharing their experience, their challenges, and their advice to us all. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.